Hello my soccer universe, for a review video of round 36 from Serie A, where Napoli slightly opened the door for Inter and pushed up by their huge Champions League heroics. Inter could well walk through it, but it's still in Napoli's hand, but their margin of error is gone. And with Napoli stumbling after Inter stumbled so much, this leads me also slowly to conclusion this is not a great Serie A season overall, because teams all over the place keep stumbling. We have not only the title candidates stumbling, we also have the same thing going for the candidates for the Champions League spots. I mean, Atalanta got it now done thanks to win over Roma. Roma's unbeaten streak snapped at this moment after 19 games, and that would have been a miracle if Roma got through. Honestly, but I think their Champions League dreams are gone now. But we see Juventus not being consistent, and overall the quality in Serie A not great. It's also exemplified by the lowest goal average in all the top leagues that I'm looking at. It's slightly above 2.5, and this started somewhere in spring when suddenly we saw a plethora of only 1-0s and 0-0s. Very Italian-like results, but not Serie A as of late. Why this is the case, I really cannot tell you, but it seems that most teams seem leggy. And I think this could be because, you know, there was a whole lot of European commitment in the last few years by Italian teams, and the rejuvenation of squads did not really work out. Add to it a hire and fire mentality that prevails in Italy, and that usually does not bode well. And you just have to look at the squad building, especially at Inter and Juventus, where so many injuries are creeping up. That kind of tells also a story. Inter might well win the Champions League and Serie A, but they do so crawling over the finishing line, and that does not bode well for the next season for Inter as well. However, there's one little team that is actually hitting form right now, and that is my favorite team, Milan. Another win in the dress rehearsal against Bologna, another comeback win. Sergio Conceição has put some winning mentality in there, and he also has found a structure where you can have all the offensive power of Theo and Leao, but also a little bit of defensive solidity. And in the Bologna game, he demonstrated he can also make on-the-fly adjustments that actually turned the game in Milan's favor. And with that run, I'm looking slightly more optimistic at this Coppa Italia final, because Bologna now have hit a little bit the skids. They are out of the Champions League race, I would argue. I mean, technically they're still in, but it's hard and everything rides on the Coppa Italia. And what does Italiano do usually? Lose finals. It would be his fourth final in a row. And from one side, from a neutral perspective, I would feel sad if Bologna loses one. But as a Milan fan, please get me finally a Coppa Italia again. I mean, it has been ages, since 2003. That Milan won the Coppa Italia. Fun fact, Milan so far have only 5 Coppa Italias but 7 Champions Leagues. That tells a story of how devalued this competition is for Milan, and I don't quite understand it, because it's a competition you should win probably way more often than you actually do. But it also poses another question, what to do with Sergio Conceição. I mean, a month ago everyone said he's gone, and I never really quite understood it, to be honest. You hired this coach on the back of sacking Fonseca in a very troubled period, and he immediately delivered the trophy. Yes, the Champions League exit was damning, and there were some troubles along the way, and he also did not shower himself in glory, especially with some press statements and his general demeanor. However, suddenly it seems to click. Maybe it needed Milan to not have to play for much anymore to actually get something good going. And if you were to ask me, Sergio Conceição is a trophy hoarder. Keep him at the club for at least another season. Give him a full preseason. I mean, Inter and Juventus are going to the Club World Cup. There's a huge chance, with the right adjustments, to actually make it far in Serie A next season. And I think with a few adjustments to the squad, that might work as well. But hey, this Milan leadership has shown anything but consistency, and that's a little bit damning as well. So those were my thoughts ahead of the Serie A review. Let's review all the matches. We'll start Friday evening in Milan. Friday evening saw a dress rehearsal between Milan and Bologna for the Coppa Italia final, and it may have given us a little bit of an idea, because Milan did not rotate as much, neither did Bologna. For Bologna this meant a whole lot, because win this game and you're very much still in the race for the Champions League spot, whereas for Milan, more or less, yeah, you'll be hanging about, but the form is building. Milan seems to be an in-form team, getting a 3-1 comeback win again. However, let's forget about the first half, where Bologna actually played quite well, despite maybe the better chances falling to Milan. But Bologna then rewarded themselves in the 49th minute when Dalinga finds Orsolini, who darts into the hole that was opened up by Gabbia pressing up forward. And with a nice shot, he crosses it in 1-0 Bologna. And no one really complained that this wouldn't have been undeserved. However, Conceição made a few changes, went then from 3 to 4 at the back, and most crucially made a triple substitution, bringing on Walker, Jimenez and Chukwueze. And may I just mention, since I mentioned these names, that Milan players of course played with their mothers' names on the back, which is a very cool feature. And especially Chukwueze was then a live wire. He was involved in all 3 goals that turned it around for Milan. First, it's a nice run by Chukwueze on the left side. He plays it into Pulisic, who finds on the right side Jimenez, and it is 1-1. Just 5 minutes later, again, a run by Chukwueze on the left side. Joao Felix takes a shot that is blocked but falls onto Pulisic, who gives Milan the lead on the night. And then in stoppage time, again, it's Chukwueze who finds Jimenez on the left side for the 3-1 winner. Was it a great performance by Milan? No, but with these changes, suddenly Milan showed that they have depth in the squad and they can turn things around, as they've done so very often this season, last week, this week. It's the same story for Milan, and maybe that is the quality that will lead you to a Coppa Italia title. It was billed as a big tussle for the final Champions League spot. However, in the end, Lazio against Juventus was rather a snooze fest that Juventus controlled for most of the time, even though Lazio may have had some early chances, but Juve held Lazio at bay. And when McKennie crosses in and Colomiani heads it home in the 51st minute, you thought this is only gonna go one way. Juventus is. And then Pierre Kalulu implodes by stupidly slapping Tati Castellanos on the back of his head. I mean, he of course held his head, and it was a clear red card, although the angle that was showed was a rather curious one. There is no better one. Serie A. That was probably the biggest contention in that scene. However, even with a man less, Lazio barely created anything, but they almost got the breakthrough when Di Gregorio brings down Tati Castellanos in the box. It's a clear penalty. However, Castellanos is also offside in the build-up, and so another one back. And then Di Gregorio makes a good save, I think on Dele Bashiru, to keep Juve still up. However, in the 97th minute, it's then Vecino who taps in. I think it was a Castellanos header that was saved by Di Gregorio, and it ends 1-1 over a lucky point. But at that point, it also meant that Juve are not in control of their Champions League destiny anymore, because Roma had the big chance to overtake them with a win at Atalanta. However, Atalanta and Roma's unbeaten streak at 19 games, beating them fully deservedly so 2-1. Again, Roma only score a single goal. However, this time there are no points coming from it, and it was a fully deserved win. Atalanta came out storming, had an early chance. Lukman, after the Ketelaere assist, already gave them a lead in the 9th minute, and the Ketelaere had 2 pretty good chances to double up that lead. Yes, Roma did have some, but Manu Kone squandered most of them, or didn't see them, man. I think there was one attack where they just missed Dovbik on the left side. But after Soulé free kick, Cristante heads it in the 32nd minute. It goes level, scores into the half-time break. Second half, yes, Roma initially tried to go for the win. Remember, they definitely needed the win to stay in contention for this Champions League spot, which would be a major miracle. However, they always got hit on the counter-attack, and one of those counter-attacks started with Lukman on the left side, and Samardžić lays it off to Sulemana, who takes a shot that he hits sweetly, but also goes through Roma defenders into net in the 76th minute. Roma then threw everything at Atalanta, but Atalanta rather routinely defended it out and secure their spot in the Champions League for next season. After the Champions League heroics, Inzaghi rotated the Inter squad in 9 positions to take on Torino away from home. Rest is more important than the league. That's the message they're sending. However, they're riding a wave because Inter got, even with a reserve squad, a 2-0 win at Torino. that doesn't reflect well on Torino, I gotta say as well. Zalewski gave Inter the early lead with his first goal for Inter, but the big story was then the deluge that came down midway through the first half. It was a waterlogged pitch. It looked very apocalyptic. Players sliding, everything you want. Shea Adams had actually a pretty good chance to equalize. However, right after the half, Dumfries and Di Marco come on, and suddenly it's all Inter again. It's a foul then on Correa, and Aslani converts the ensuing penalty in the 49th minute. Inter could have won this by a whole lot more and managed to actually put pressure on Napoli while resting their stars. And looking at the final result, Napoli slightly cracked. They only managed a 2-2 draw at home against Genoa. However, it has to be said, this was a good Napoli performance. Napoli had full control of the game and created plenty of chances. An early one by Politano went wide, but then McTominay, player of the season for Napoli, bar none, finds Lukaku, who wrestled past the defender, could have been given as a foul as well, makes it 1-0 in the 15th minute. And then Napoli, that was the only time where they were letting it slide for a little bit, because Genoa then had a chance to hit the crossbar. They got the equalizer from a header by the youngest player on the field, Ahanor, that Meret saves onto the post, but then it also goes via his knee into the net, so it's a Meret own goal. But then Napoli again went out, especially early in the second half. They created a chance. It was a one by Anguissa, and finally McTominay finds Raspadori, who with a brilliant move glides past 2 or 3 defenders and puts it into the 64th minute. Napoli on track to extend the lead to 3 points again. And there was almost nothing coming from Genoa until Martin gets a nice cross in and Vasquez heads it in and places it well. However, we also have to talk about defending, especially Billing mistimed his jump to clear that header. Tries they might, Napoli cannot find a winner, and it's even more damning as Genoa and Napoli fans are twinned. So Genoa taking points of Napoli that they might need. Well, Napoli still enjoy an advantage. However, from now on, they can only afford to win. Moving into the relegation battle, Cagliari had a 1-0 lead at Como. However, goals by Cacares, Refezza and Patrick Cutrone turned it around for Como, meaning that Cagliari mathematically are not safe yet. However, with a 5-point cushion to the first relegation spot, they look relatively safe. Meanwhile, Empoli gave themselves a huge chance of survival by beating Parma at home 2-1, a result that also means that Parma are not through yet. Fazzini, local boy, opened the scoring in the 11th minute after Henderson corner, and then Valenti is sent off for a second yellow card after 30 minutes. Parma, though, were not too badly in the game, however, more chance, of course, for Empoli. It is then Djuric who gets the equalizer after a cross into the box that no one actually touches. So Parma, even with a man less, are looking to get a point and maybe keep Empoli at bay. However, it's then Anjorin with a wonderful shot from far out in the 86th minute that secures Empoli the 3 points and a slim chance for survival. On the other hand, things look a little bit more dour for Lecce, who only get a 1-1 draw at Verona. Again, a point that mathematically sees Verona not quite safe yet, but puts Lecce, of course, a little bit more in trouble. They took the lead through Kristovic, who has been their main goal scorer. However, Coppola in the 41st minute gets equalizer for Verona, who were wearing in these tribute jerseys to the title-winning team 40 years ago. Venezia knew with a win over Fiorentina they can leave the relegation zone, and they did so. It was a horrible first half in rain in Venice. However, in the 60th minute, Candé puts Venezia in front, and then a Ranieri shot hits the post. Was actually a nice clearance by Radu onto the post, and from that counter-attack the ball goes out to Zerbin, cross in, and Oristanio heads it in. However, the hair really looked a little bit weird there because he was just standing there, not really defending the cross very well. Mandragora in the 77th pulls one back, but Fiorentina cannot find an equalizer, meaning that they are really falling out of European contention, whereas Venezia at least have in theory a shot at survival. And then there was one truly meaningless game in this Serie A round where Monza, already relegated Monza, get a 2-1 away win at Udinese, with Balde scoring the winning goal in the 90th minute. So, if we look now at the current Serie A standings, up top it's only a single point between Napoli and Inter. Napoli play Parma away and Cagliari at home, whereas Inter host Lazio and then have to go to Como. So, on paper, Napoli's schedule looks easier, however Parma have something to play for. As to Lazio, to be honest, but Lazio are in really bad form and Como is maybe a dangerous team. I just think that Inter will win out, so it will be very much down to Napoli of winning out to claim a fourth Scudetto. Atalanta safe in the Champions League, and I think they have achieved probably what they set out to do this season. And Juve still in the driver's seat, however, level on points with Lazio, with Roma only a point behind. However, looking at schedule, Juve have Udinese at home and Venezia away. Venezia away could be tricky because Venezia will be battling against relegation, and also Juve have quite some defenders missing for the upcoming games, but I still would think that Juve look better because Lazio have to go to Inter, not an easy path, and then hosting Lecce, who also have to play against relegation, whereas Roma go against Milan right after the Coppa Italia final, and then to Torino, so wide open. And Bologna also do have a slight chance, but it's very, very slim. Bologna play in the Apennine derby against Fiorentina away from home, a Fiorentina team whose season has been going down, and then they host Genoa, so maybe there's a miracle for Bologna in there. What about Milan? Well, very much an outside chance. You need all the results falling your way. However, Milan have to go to Rome and then have Monza in the last game of the season. So, I could see Milan winning out. Will it be enough to carry them into the Champions League? I honestly doubt it. In the relegation battle, Cagliari, Hellas and Parma are not safe with 5 and 4 points cushion towards Empoli, who sit in the first relegation spot. However, theoretically it is relatively safe. When I look at the games, especially that Venezia, Empoli and Lecce have to play, Venezia probably have the toughest schedule. They have to fly to Cagliari, so a long away trip, and then they host Juventus at home. Whereas Empoli go to already relegated Monza and then host Verona, a Verona team that might be safe already at this point of the season. And Lecce host Torino and then have to go to Lazio, so Lecce also have a relatively tough schedule, meaning it actually looks decent for Empoli. However, Venezia have a point advantage, and maybe, just maybe, Venezia can get the miracle done. Looking at the upcoming games, we first have, of course, the Coppa Italia Wednesday evening. Milan playing Bologna in Rome. Milan in home jerseys, Bologna in away jerseys. I was surprised that Milan is not playing in white, if I'm honest. Yeah, that's gonna be the biggest game of the week, I would argue. At least for me, and I very much Rossoneri glasses on. We already talked a little bit about the weekend matches, and as of now, they really haven't been scheduled. They all say Sunday at 3 o'clock. I doubt that this will happen this way because Serie A is notorious for announcing late when games will be played. Maybe by the time this video posts, we already know the actual kickoff time, so check your listings. Roma-Milan is the classic in there, but we already pointed out, Cagliari-Venezia, a point for Cagliari would mean safety. Venezia need at least a point, if not a win, because Empoli will probably get the 3 points at Monza, although Monza winning at Udinese was rather unexpected. We also have the other Milan-Rome duel, where I only expect an Inter win over Lazio, and that these two sets of fans are very much twinned as well. Napoli going to Parma. Parma need the points. Parma is the one team that still can be caught by the ones below. So this is not an easy trip for Napoli, but maybe it's exactly what Napoli would need. A Parma team that actually plays quite open to hit them and maybe get goals on the counter. But it's also not exactly the Napoli way. But despite all the heroics that Parma have done against bigger opponents, I really have to say, this is something that Napoli just has to win if you want to become champions. So these were my thoughts on round 36. This is a week that I'm actually looking forward to. I have not seen Milan and Coppa Italia final for quite a while. I think the last one was when they lost against the brilliant Juve side 4-0. Yeah, that was not a good memory. I actually know that I had my streaming subscription back then and I was so pumped, and then I just turn it off after a while. I hope this will not happen this time around. I'm really hopeful that Milan will win it. But the league is exciting. But again, the quality in the league is unfortunately not that good. But that might change. We hear that De Bruyne is headed potentially to Napoli. I would love that move on so many levels, but we also need a few more top class players coming into Serie A. I actually feel that next season could be a crucial one, because I really feel that Inter and Juve will feel the aftershocks of being at the Club World Cup, so watch out for that. In any case, please let me know your thoughts on Serie A in the comments below. Will Milan win the Coppa Italia? Will they get an unlikely Champions League berth? I don't think so, but I would love it if it would happen. In any case, thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like these, and I'll talk to you soon with more things in my Serie A universe. Bye! Hey there! I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, here are some videos and playlists that you may enjoy too. Also, please consider subscribing to my channel and hit the little bell icon so you get notified whenever something happens in my soccer universe. And with that, have a wonderful day. Bye!